it was kind of like David versus Goliath. CDM had one attorney, Major League Baseball, along with Major League Baseball Players Association. They had like tons of attorneys, high power, Washington, D.C. attorneys, high priced. They had a meeting in St. Louis where CDM had their one attorney and Major League Baseball had like 25. They flew in like 25 attorneys for this meeting. And basically, it's like David versus Goliath, and CDM ended up winning. And the Major League Baseball tried to appeal to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided they declined to take the case. At that point, CDM had won, and that, if it wasn't for that, the industry would not be like it is today. Then another big legal thing is the question of gambling. Is fantasy sports gambling?
Mm-hmm.
This goes back all the way to the very first football league, that I was talking about before, Andy Mussolini's and his bar. Their scoring system was, if my team got a touchdown, everybody else in my league would give me 10 cents.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be like a 10-cent league. And some leagues were like 20 cents or 30 cents or whatever. But even though it was cents, they called it points. So they called it like a 10 points league instead of a 10 cents league. The reason they did that is because they didn't know if one day the vice squad was going to walk in and bust them for gambling.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a couple of incidents over the years, like I think it was the 80s in Austin, Texas. A bar was raided and they arrested people for their fantasy baseball league for gambling. And the Fort Lauderdale Fire Department, another one that they arrested them for gambling. And so it's been, for years and years, question is fantasy sports gambling when you're involving, money in it. And finally, it got resolved by the federal government deemed it's not gambling, and 45 states have deemed it's not gambling, and about five states still say it is gambling.
Right.
And have made it, illegal to have fantasy sports for money. And the common, the main, what's the word I'm looking for? The main point to determine if it's gambling or not is the question: is it more luck than skill? If it's more luck than skill, like a roulette wheel, is obviously all luck.
All luck.
Unless you have ESP, roulette is 100% luck, so that's gambling.
Uh-huh.
But if there's more skill, then it's not gambling. And so they determined, fantasy sports is actually, there is luck involved, but it's more skill than luck.
But I'm glad you brought that up, Larry, because when you look at a site like DraftKings or some of the sites out there, FanDuel and all of those guys, you can play fantasy sports, but there's always that disclaimer at the bottom of the screen that says, "Please gamble responsibly," which it just throws everybody off in a sense, because are you gambling or you're
Daily fantasy sports really pushes the envelope of that question: is it gambling or not? And now, like DraftKings, they also have a sports book. So I'm not even sure, like that warning about the gambling, I'm not even sure if that's because they have a sports book or if they have that just for daily fantasy sports. But you can make a stronger argument that daily fantasy sports is gambling than you can with like season-long fantasy sports. But even then, they kind of prove that even daily fantasy sports, it's more skill than luck. So therefore, not gambling.
Okay.
Interesting.
There was another fascinating part of the book where you talked about in some of the origins of fantasy sports, how they determined the scoring. And I remember there was one area I read where is related to fantasy football. I think they allotted 50 points for a quarterback throwing a touchdown. I mean, it was just, the point system was like enormous, because I think about how we play fantasy football today in our league that me and Jacob are in. A team might at the end of a football week might have maybe 150 points to 200 points, but back then it seemed like, man, you could score 2,500 points, with your team.
Yeah, I mean, people had different kinds of scoring systems, but like the original league with Winkenbach, they like is mostly only touchdowns. So, and then Andy Mussolini started to tweak the rules when he started his own leagues in the bar. He started to tweak the rules because he said, like, only touchdowns back then. He said, back then O.J. Simpson would run for 100 yards, and Pete Banaszak would have the 1 yard plunge for the touchdown. So Pete Banaszak's getting all the points for a 1 yard plunge, and Simpson's running for 100 yards, he got nothing. So they started to add points for yardage. And then you got like Emil Padlak, who's in the book. He was involved in a couple of big things. He's one of the guys that started high stakes fantasy football with live drafts in Vegas, and he also started one of the first magazines that became very, very large. But Padlak was in his own, fantasy football league with friends for years and years, and they had very simplistic rules. And every year, in the off season, he kind of try to get them to add something more interesting, like how about a point per reception, or some other thing. And they're like, no, we don't need that crap. Like, our rules are the best ever. We don't need to change anything.
Gene, there is one thing that you can take away from the old iterations of fantasy football that we need to put in ours. Something that I alone have been asking for. So in the beginning of the book, everybody that has the league, they all do one thing, and that is individual defensive players. You play a linebacker, you play a corner, or you play a defensive lineman. It's individual defensive players. Greatest invention of all time is having that involved in your fantasy league.
Yeah, and some still have that. I would say most probably don't have it. I've never been in a league that has it.
We do one league. So my uncle and I are co-commissioners for this league. We've had it running for 11 years now. And it's, I think, 9 individual defensive players that you also have to draft on top of your typical offense. And it's a lot more work, but it's more fun. It makes you pay attention to more.
You do. It is a lot of work. And I think the reason why we sort of went with, like some of the traditional ones, like you even mentioned in your book, Yahoo Sports. That's the first time I ever started playing fantasy sports. It was through Yahoo. And then, so they came up with defense special teams, which, sort of kind of, if you pick the right defense special teams, you never know from week to week who's going to have a good category. But one reason why we chose not to do the individuals, because it's just so much, it just takes so much, it's so time consuming to where.
Especially if you're doing 9 like Jacob. Yeah, I'm mostly in leagues where you get one defense, maybe a
team.
When fantasy sports started, one of the reasons, like going back to Oakland, like one of the reasons they picked the categories that they picked is because that's what was available in the newspapers.
Yep.
Like there were a couple other categories they would like to have had, but they weren't published in the newspaper. So they couldn't do it. Now, there was an exception where there was a USA Today office league that started, and they wanted to have, I can't remember the category. It might have been caught stealing or something. I can't remember. But there was a category. USA Today started office league, and there was a category they wanted to have, but it wasn't published in the newspaper. But because they were the USA Today, they had the power to start publishing it. So they added this category to their publication for their fantasy league.
Which is wild. Like, just the evolution of it over time is interesting.
Larry, I remember back in the 90s, and look, I've worked a ton of odd jobs besides doing radio and stuff. But one particular part-time gig I ended up doing was working for a company called Stat Inc. Okay,
Yeah.
and I think my job, and they had like thousands of people across the country watching these same games,
Yep.
and I guess they would just, you report what you saw and whatever stats, whether it's Hakeem Olajuwon, how many rebounds did he have, this, that, and the other. And I mean, it paid them easily, I don't know, $50 a week. But now that I look back on it and after, reading the book, it's like, man, this is gathering all of that information. And of course, now they just throw it into a computer.
Well, guess what? Technically, you're mentioned in the book because Stats Inc. is in the book, and it mentions how they had people watching games, collecting the statistics, and you were one of those people.
Yeah. I know. I know. When I saw that, I was like, wow. I said, I can't believe it. I mean, and I thought it was kind of tedious work at the time, but man, who knew that it actually meant something? And when you look at that today. So Larry, a question I have for you. So, where do you see it kind of like going today? I mean, where it is right now. How could it be enhanced? I mean, is it gonna go away, you think? I mean, or is it gonna blossom even more? I mean, what are your thoughts on the future of fantasy sports?
It's never going to go away. I mean, people, a lot of people who play fantasy sports say they're going to keep playing until they die. In a survey, I think it was 40% or more in the survey said they're going to play until they die. It's not going to go away. And people keep thinking it can't get bigger, and it keeps getting bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. Jacob?
To kind of piggyback off of that, there was a better piggyback earlier. But so I mentioned that there was the second most interesting part of your book to me earlier. The first, the cumulative effort from front to back of your book. The biggest takeaway that I took was that the founders, the creators of fantasy, but football and baseball primarily, just because those are the two biggest sports. The true founders of it didn't necessarily make a dime off of its creation. And to me, that stood out a lot. But Larry, since you did all the research, you compiled all of the information and whatnot, as you were writing this book, what was the thing that stood out the most to you while you were writing it? Like, what was the one takeaway that just kind of blew your mind?
Well, I think, I've mentioned before that the fact that I would keep discovering one thing after another that I didn't know about, and I knew almost nobody else knows about. And it was either fascinating, inspirational, funny, or a combination of the three. And I just knew, my God, nobody knows this stuff, and it was amazing. And, Paul Charchian, one of the first people I gave the book to was Paul Charchian, who is very involved in the industry, and he was the president of the Fantasy Sports Trade Association for like 10 years. And he read it and he said, I've been in the industry my whole life and I didn't know a lot of this stuff. He was fascinated by it. So that's one thing. And the other thing, as I said before, is just realizing how fantasy sports brings people together, like, incredibly. The whole, it's a cultural phenomenon.
Now, do you still play, Larry, today?
Oh yeah, I play football and baseball. Before I came on tonight, I was looking at tight ends.
Okay.
So look, I'm getting ready for my draft.
We found this picture here, and so kind of explain what's going on here. What's this trophy? It looked like baseball, right? So what is this? Is this part of that $110,000 windfall? There we go. There we go. We got it real time there, man.
That is, what year is this? That's from 2011. I won the Tout Wars.
Okay, yeah.
Tout Wars is one of the two experts leagues,
Yeah.
and they generally don't give a trophy. But that was one of the years that it actually the Saber Society gave us trophies that year.
Yeah. Now, what is your take on there's a lot of people that fantasy football leagues, I guess, our fantasy football league for years, it was just simply free. And now we've had these guys play this league for a couple of years now. We take it serious, but now we have oh good Lord, look at the rate for what we charge, Larry, we'll never catch up to you with with the six-figure stuff. But what do we do, Jacob? I think our top guy wins what, $600-$700, I don't know, and then there's a second place,
600,
and then there's a third place.
Yeah, 600. What is it? 600, 300, and 150.
So my question, I guess, if you're going to charge people to play this, then is it best you get serious people that really want to play? Because other than that, you're going to have a bunch of whiners.
Well, a lot of people are in leagues with no money involved. It's just for the competition and bragging rights, and a lot of leagues have relatively small amounts of money. And then there's some high stakes leagues. There's I mentioned before, Emil Pavlik is one of the people that started the whole high stakes concept. And there are some people that play in these leagues where there's $350 entry fee or $1,700 entry fee, and some even $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 entry fee.
Wow, Jacob, we got a long way, man, to get to that.
But
point,
there's not, but of all the people who play fantasy sports, the percentage of people who are in leagues with that, much money involved is not, that's not very high.
Yeah, I could only imagine. I'm holding out hope that one day Gene pays me enough money that I could enter a $20,000 fantasy league. That's really, at this point, it's my hope and my dream.
So Larry, you say you're into it right now. We got baseball that's going to be winding down here pretty soon. You got football that's starting up. Oh yeah, but there's a lady that you mentioned in the book who we had the pleasure of having her on the show. We were at the Super Bowl, 2017 Super Bowl. I think it was the Falcons and the Patriots. And Cynthia Freeland, she stopped by. Yeah. And she joined us on the show. I love her work. She is a numbers person, to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a chapter in the book about sabermetrics and advanced analytics and how that started and evolved, and she's mentioned in that chapter. Mm-hmm. That goes back that goes back to a quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, who was the first one to really start looking at advanced analytics.
Yeah, that was very interesting. So look, we can't let you leave without getting some sort of tips or pointers here. Now, this is where I should probably kick Jacob off the show and just me and you talk, but I'm not going to do that to him. Because we both need a fair advantage here.
Don't take long. Promo doomsday.
Really?
Oh, wow!
Yeah, I've heard there's a little concern about his recovery from injury.
Because he was out for like the last 7 weeks of last season. There's concerns that it's not totally healed. That's great information. He was on my board, so.
Yeah, I mean, this is another thing that's developed is they're injury experts. Mm-hmm. That one of the chapters in my book is called like innovative entrepreneurs. Some random things like injury experts being one of them that just evolved. There's like these doctors who know, they really know all this stuff and they apply it to fantasy sports. And they say, look, this guy had this particular injury and he's not going to recover well from that. Or to the contrary, he'll be fine, Stephania
Mhm.
Bell is, in that
Yeah, I
chat.
remember her.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's one of the big ones, and they're, you know,
yeah, yeah. She's real big. So, how much emphasis, or if any, do you put on? Because we tell our friends we watch the preseason. Tomorrow night, I'll be at the Raiders and Texans preseason game. We, from our perspective, because we got to have something to talk about it. But even from a fantasy football perspective, later on in the year, these guys that you see on these rosters now that's trying to get on the team or make the team, they might be impact players later on in the year. Like if your number ones go down. So do you put any type of importance on the preseason as it relates to fantasy football?
um, I don't put a lot of emphasis on preseason, but there's obvious stuff. If obviously somebody gets hurt, and there's some positional battles, but most of the positional battles aren't necessarily relevant to fantasy. Like, if a guy is going to be the third running back instead of the fourth running back, you're not going to draft him anyway. But there's obvious stuff where, is Cam Scatterboo healthy? Is he going to be number one? Or, they just signed Najee Harris, so it looks like it may also be a committee. I'm not saying anything brilliant here. I'm just kind of stating the obvious. But going back years ago, there wasn't this kind of information. Like Ian Allen, who started a magazine I mentioned earlier, he would have people from all over the country send him, videotapes of games because you couldn't watch games. If you're in Seattle, you can watch the Seahawks, but you can't watch all the other teams back then. So he'd have people send videotapes of preseason games, and he would watch them to see what was going on. Because now you look at RotoWire, RotoWorld, all these other websites are available, and if you get all this information about people who are hurt or their position battles. Is Kyler Murray starting or is JJ McCarthy starting? You get all this information easily, but years ago you didn't get information. You had to dig for it. And that's why people started magazines and started other things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, once again, we are talking with author of The History of Fantasy Sports and the stories of the people who made it happen. Larry Schechter is joining us tonight here on the Sports Kings NFL Weekly Prediction Show. Next week, we'll definitely be talking. We're going to do our draft next week, and we actually do this draft online, which is kind of fun. Now, look, we have to navigate the show, and we got these computer screens, so it's kind of fun. We've done it. We did it. We launched it in Vegas when we had a residency at Virgin Hotel, so we did our big fantasy football show out there. And speaking of Vegas, Larry, are you surprised at how many people traveled to Las Vegas to hold their fantasy football draft? I mean, I think it's thousands. Even the hotels out there are in on it because they charge extra for the space because they know this time of the year, late August, people are flocking out there to hold their drafts.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, people doing fantasy drafts in person is fun. Vegas is fun, typically, or sometimes too much fun. But yeah, that was
now
that goes back. Elmo Cadillac and his partner, they did the first Vegas draft. They took a big risk seeing if that concept would work. They could have lost a ton of money on that, but it worked out once they started the whole high stakes industry.
Now I will have to go ahead.
I was going to mention too, just The book is available on Amazon. You can get all the details of what's in it. See, all the reviews are great. It's also available. Most booksellers' websites have it available in paperback and ebook, and it's on Apple and Kobo and all the normal ebook channels. So people should either buy it or get it on your wish list for your birthday or Christmas. And it makes a great gift for people. Like if you get like my first book, Winning Fantasy Baseball, if you're in a baseball league, you want to read that and not tell your league mates about it. Any kind of good advice and strategy, you don't want to tell them go to RotoWire but this is a book you can buy for your whole league. There's no strategy in there, so you're not losing any competitive advantage.
Yeah, that is true. But look, and I have to admit here and agree with you. When it comes to fantasy draft day, it is like having sex for the first time because you don't know what the hell is going to happen. I love that.
You're not agreeing with me. I didn't say that's in the book. I didn't say that. That was one of the guys.
It is.
That was one of the guys.
It's funny.
One of the guys in Dan Oakland's original league. He's the one who said that. He said like the first draft is like it's like sex. I don't really know what's happening, but I want to come back for more.
Hilarious. And that's the way we're going to be next week, Jacob, when we do our draft. Larry, man, we are so we're going to be respectful of your time. We know it's getting late there on the East Coast, but we are so grateful for you joining us tonight. And we're going to put this back up here again. We want to make sure that people go out and get this book. It's great. Do it. Get the book. If you're a fantasy football player, it's a must-have. Okay. And if you're the girlfriend and wife of a fantasy football player, then you might want to get it because you need to know what the hell's going on as well, and you need to know why this is such a big thing because it's fascinating. This is marvelous. So we thank you for coming on and joining us tonight.
All right, thanks for having me.
All right,
thank you, Larry.
Great stuff. So what we're gonna do next week, we'll come back and we will definitely. Jacob, great stuff. I mean, like you said, there's no competitive advantage, and but there's tons of information, and I know. I mean, look, there was so much in this book we could have asked Larry about. There's so much to go over, man. But just you read the book, you get it from A through Z. I know we bounced around a little bit because there was a lot of information we wanted everybody to know, but great stuff.
Absolutely. And anybody watching the show, right? I hate reading. I can't emphasize that enough. I won't pick up a book to save my life. I stopped in 2015 and never looked back. And the book is phenomenal. So all of the stories we reference throughout the show, they're better in the book. It's funny.
Absolutely.
It is an easy read. Go buy Larry Schechter's book.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff there. So look, now next week is going to be our fantasy football draft here on the Sports Kings NFL Weekly Prediction Show. So this was just perfect timing, right? In the sense that we get Larry on, we talk about this stuff. Look, normally by now I would have already done maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 other leagues. I haven't, and it's kind of maybe I get it done because it don't take long. All you got to do is you go to any website and you can just be sucked into a draft just like that. Mm-hmm. And now I haven't even did a mock draft. Normally I would have done maybe 2 or 3 mock drafts, but I haven't done anything. So I'm a little worried, but then again I'm not. And all of these freaking injuries here, I guess we could kind of talk a little bit breaking news there. From a Houston Texans point of view, and I know you want to talk about what happened there with one of their star receivers.
I will take the floor on that, and then also the information that you gave right before we got on the show, whereas Jaden Higgins tore his ACL and joined practice with the Raiders. This was yesterday, right? Confirmed today, but torn yesterday. So Higgins is completely out. Thank God Tank Dell's coming back. But Higgins tore his ACL, should be out for the season. And because of that, D'Amico Ryans has pulled the starters from all padded practice. There is no tackling, no hitting, in an effort to save the starters from potentially more injuries happening, it's a blessing and a curse, right? Curse because once again, we have a stud receiver that goes down, and luckily we have better depth at receiver than we have in years past, but we had another receiver go down, and D'Amico Ryans pulling the starters is both a good and a bad thing, right? So the starters there's less chance of them getting banked up. However, like you attested to, Gene, when the starters aren't getting live reps, that means when it comes game time, there's just that added risk that because they haven't been taking live game reps, the reps can be harder once they actually begin, and more injuries could actually happen. So that is the big news out of Texans camp today.
It's really sad, and it happens every year. I guess it's always disappointing and definitely newsworthy when it happens. We have to talk about it, but man, I'm going to the game tomorrow night, so I was so looking forward to, at least for a quarter, to seeing the starters out there. And when you're a team like the Texans, who the expectations are high going into this season, and their schedule is definitely brutal. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. I understand. I think it's a knee-jerk reaction, as I told you earlier. But I mean, look, man, there's nothing more devastating than what you saw with Aaron Rodgers, his first snap with the New York Jets, and this was after not playing. I mean, I don't care if you're a veteran. I don't care if I think you have to have some freaking contact. Now, you can't mandate that they put their players out there, but man, I just think it's better. It's better. Look, what do you want it to happen in the training camp? A preseason game, or you want it to be the first regular season game against a division opponent? I mean, it's. I know it's a tough one, but I think players should play during the preseason. I don't care who you are. And Aaron Rodgers was a prime example of, you're a veteran. You need to get your ass out there. Whereas Patrick Mahomes, on the other hand, wants to play during the preseason.
Yeah, and I think most of the players recognize it as well, right? When you're out there taking live reps and it's a real game simulation as opposed to just practice, it does something different for you. And I do think that most players see that. I think most players welcome the early snaps, albeit, I'm sure everybody's glad there's not a fourth preseason game. I'm sure they're glad they're not playing 4 full quarters during the preseason. But I do think that most players would agree with you that the live reps are important.
And we used to see, like, when they had 4 preseason games, they would use that 4th game as a dress rehearsal. You would almost see the starters play through a whole half. Now, I think that still happens, but I don't know, man. And then you think about the league. They wanting to get to 18 games now. Who knows? Maybe even 20 is in their future. But you want to reduce. I don't know how you can reduce preseason. I mean, you have to simulate this thing some kind of way before. It's not like they're running real plays in preseason anyway. You're just trying to, get some contact going and see what you got 99 people on the damn roster. You need to try to see you already know who your 22 players are. You got your special teams, and then you got your what do you call those guys? The practice squad guys. But there's a lot of people out there. And that's another reason why you don't see a lot of starters, because you do have so many people that you have to fill and choose. And another reason why they don't play those starters, because they know who the starters are going to be. But I just think as it comes, the joint sessions are good. I mean, that's okay. And this is when that injury happened with Higgins, right? Because the Texans were doing joint sections with the Raiders. But how about if I tell you the Pittsburgh Steelers, they don't do joint sections. Some teams don't even do joint sections. So it's just crazy how I guess the league gives them some leeway to how they want to do that.
It's wild. And you said you don't know how you can condense the preseason and make it all work. The joint practices would be the way I would do it. If you got rid of preseason entirely, do 4 separate weeks of joint practices with different teams, right? So the Texans would play 4 separate teams over a 4-week period, which would ultimately be their preseason. But you bring in another media company like Hard Knocks did, right? You bring in a company similar to Hard Knocks, or the NFL creates a sub company similar to Hard Knocks, and you televise it. Televise the joint practices, right? Leave out any of the tricky stuff, but it's essentially you give a Hard Knocks to all 32 teams, and all 32 teams have joint practices with everybody else.
That might be the future.
The preseason.
Right, that might be the future. Especially if you want to go to 20 games, 18 games, or whatever they want to do. That's definitely something to consider. So Dustin Pfeiffer couldn't join us tonight. He will definitely be here next week when we do our fantasy football draft. So once again, we want to thank Larry. So we did have some technical snafus early on in the show. We'll work those kinks out, get those shorts out available to everyone to enjoy. But Jacob, man, I tell you what, after talking to Larry, sort of geek for the fantasy football next week, man. I got a lot of work to do between now and when is the draft? Next Wednesday?
I don't know.
1 week to kind of. I got to get at least 2 other. I got to do 2 other leagues here because I always like jumping in on a worthless league that I just would play with total strangers, just so I can see how my real draft is going to take place. And you're right, I have sucked historically in this damn league, and I'm sick and tired of it. I'm going to blow Larry's phone up for the next 7 days. trying to get.
Hey, and how about his nugget of fantasy wisdom telling people not to draft Romo Dunze because of the under the table ankle issue that he might still be suffering from?
Well, wait a minute. You don't have DJ Moore, who was very instrumental in. You got Luther Burden, but it was DJ Moore, right? Was the number 1 receiver for the Bears last year, right?
Well, there's an asterisk next to that. So before Romo Dunze went out for the season, over the last 6 games that he was starting, Rome Odunze was actually like the number 2 fantasy wide receiver in the NFL and one of the best
you're right.
He was. So DJ Moore was used more out of necessity because Luther Burden was hurt, Rome was hurt, and then you had DJ Moore and you had the 2 tight end setup.
Well, Buffalo didn't get that memo. Okay, Buffalo says, "Hey, he's our guy," right? So we're going to roll with him. But that is good information. But look here, if the Bears are going to be successful, and we just talked about what Ben Johnson said last week. We want to outscore people. We want to blow up the scoreboard. We want to do all of this. You're going to have to get it done with more than just Luther Burden, right? You're going to.
Yep.
I don't know how you get it done without you doing it, right?
That's true. Colston Loveland's not going to put up 300 yards in a game.
No. I mean, not just, you're tight end, unless it's Brock. He's not a Brock Bowers type guy.
Bowers could, that's fair.
Bowers could, but no, but Loveland. So anyway, all right. Well, we're gonna wrap this thing up here. And once again, if you missed any part of this show, it was all fantasy football for the most part, and so make sure you go and check us out, and make sure you get. We put his book up, and I know he's dropped off, but the history of fantasy sports and the stories of the people who made it happen. Great book. Make sure you go out there and get that. Jacob, I am going to watch a little bit of WNBA here that's happening tonight, and look, we'll see you back here. Dustin Pfeiffer will be here next week. We'll be back here next week on the Sports Kings NFL Weekly Prediction Show right here on YouTube.com. And Jacob, look, we're almost at 5,000 subscribers. Okay, this time last year, we had 153.
Yep.
Yeah.
Isn't it incredible?
Yeah, this time last
Shout
year.
out to all the fans.
Shout out to everyone who likes what we do here, and definitely and I won't say it's just all football because I think one of our biggest shows
was basketball.
So it's just amazing. So how that happens. So anyway, we'll be back next week, and we hope you will too. And enjoy your week. Enjoy your fantasy preseason football this week. This is week 2 for preseason football. And so watch that, kind of get a feel for what's happening out there. And we'll be back here next week for the Sports Kings draft. Okay, it's going to be fun. It's going to be some yelling, screaming, cursing, you name it. You're going to see it all play out live here on our Sports Kings show. We'll see you back here next week.